Hello, welcome to the channel that aims to bring some light into games left in the dark. This is From the Void. So, since the reception for the previous video was very positive, I decided to make a follow-up with a bunch more games that you may want to consider getting before the store closes on PlayStation 3, Vita or PSP, and that may become harder to get later for one reason or another. So if the game is available on more current platforms like Steam, Switch or PlayStation 4, I won't be including it here. As with the previous video, I'll be comparing the digital and physical prices of the games. The physical prices are for the complete North American copies, unless I say otherwise, and will be the lowest asking prices on eBay as of the making of this video in April 2021. So get ready, cause I have a great list here with a bunch of awesome games, many of which are hidden gems. But before we get there, I have two other matters to attend to real quick. The first one is that unfortunately people are already noticing some games being removed from the PlayStation Vita store. This seems to be related to the publisher of these games and not to Sony, but a number of games has been removed from the Vita store with no warning whatsoever. Most of these games were removed from the European store only, while a few were removed from all regions. Most of them actually I even listed on the previous video, like the Arc the Lad games, Tomba 1 and 2 and Gaia Seed. And here's the list of games just removed that you won't be finding to purchase through the Vita any longer. I don't have an European PSN account, so I can't really check this, but I'll leave the sources in the description. The second matter at hand is that I'd like to correct myself in one thing that I got wrong in the previous video. There exists a working emulator for the PlayStation 3. I was under the wrong impression that it was far less advanced. I apologize for this misinformation. Still important to say that around 40% of the PlayStation 3 catalog is still not working properly in this emulator, according to their own site. The PS Vita, however, is the one that doesn't really have a proper functional emulator. There is one in experimental phase, and according to their site, only 11 games are working on it so far. Okay, that's it. Let's get to the games. Okay, get ready, cause this first one is as awesome as it is obscure. This is Short Piece, Ranko Tsukigime's Longest Day. This is not just a game, by the way, it's a multimedia collection comprised of 4 anime movies and 1 game. They are bundled together and form a tribute to Japan's history, with each entry representing a different era of Japan. The game represents the modern era, where the main protagonist Ranko lives in an underground automatic car parking garage. It's crazy. I found the special effects really well done and a highlight in this game's graphics for sure. The gameplay is simple, but so much fun. It's a side-scroller action platformer, but the catch is that you gotta move fast, because if you don't, the hands will catch you. You don't want that. And it soon becomes very tricky to figure out how to trespass some sections, and there is a lot of collectibles to find, best times to beat, so there is a lot of incentive to replay, which is great because this is a very short game lasting around 2 hours, but you can more than double that if you go for all the extra stuff, and this is such a fun game that you will be tempted to do it. I guess this is a great game for trophy hunters too. The digital copy is $19.99 and it's on PlayStation 3 only. A bit expensive, but remember, it comes with 4 short movies that are very cool. There is a physical copy, but it never came to the Americas, it's PAL only, and goes for around $45-50 plus the shipping that can be painful in this case. However you prefer to get this, my suggestion is don't skip on Short Piece, Ranko Tsukigime's Longest Day. Next up, one of the several excellent titles from Vanillaware, Muramasa Rebirth. Other than being absolutely awesome, This game is on the list because it's the only version of Muramasa that grants us access to the DLC, which is comprised of 4 story chapters with new characters, and it's an excellent DLC not to be missed. So move fast cause you won't be able to purchase them soon. And these 4 chapters will become almost completely unplayable once the stores close because the experimental emulator for the Vita does not run this game. The only other way to play it would be to hack your Vita, I guess. In any case, I would really advise anyone to get this because Muramasa is a great title with outstanding visuals as per usual from Vanillaware, and it's a brilliant action RPG that controls like nothing else. You kinda put your characters in stances by, say, pressing down to crouch and holding square. Then when you release, your ninja will unleash some awesome techniques that just feel awesome to pull off. This, in my opinion, is a must-play title that is only available digitally on the Vita for $24.99 or bundled with the DLC for $34.99. I know it's a steep price, but it's totally worth it and less expensive than the physical, also exclusive on the Vita, that is going for around $55 without the DLC, mind you, and is trending up fast. There is also the original version called Muramasa the Demon Blade, which is a Wii exclusive and goes for a bit over $40, but does not grant access to the DLC. It is not in HD, of course, and it doesn't have the improved controller scheme available in Rebirth. Next up, the awesome Breath of Fire series. I swear I don't know what happened that I didn't include this in my previous video, but I'm happy to fix that now. This is one of my favorite RPG series ever. I hope one day they can bring it back in a more fitting way. None of that Japan-only microtransaction in mobile nonsense. Anyway, we currently have access to Breath of Fire 3 and 4, and those are both awesome RPGs, let me tell you that right now. Vast worlds to explore, deep and cool stories to unfold, outstanding pixel art graphics and animations, especially in Breath of Fire 4, some of the best party members in all of RPGs in my opinion, great battle mechanics, especially in 4 where you can swap in characters that are outside of the battle, and last but most importantly, dragons. If you are a fan of RPGs, these 2 games are a must-play in my opinion. By the way, although all entries in the series carry multiple references to each other, and there are theories of how they are interconnected, none are direct sequels, meaning you don't need to have played any of the previous ones to enjoy any of them. You can grab these for $5.99 each, however, because the version of Breath of Fire 3 available on PSN is the PSP one, it's only available to purchase on the Vita and PSP, while 4 is available on all 3 platforms. Breath of Fire 3 can be found for around $60 for the PlayStation physical, while the PSP version is cheaper at around $30. Breath of Fire 4 goes for around $100, exclusive to the PlayStation 1 physically. Now for a rather obscure, unique, and beautiful game, GrimGrimoire. This is another game from Vanillaware, better known for their work in Odin's Sphere, Dragon's Crown, and more recently 13 Sentinels. GrimGrimoire is one of their earliest titles back in the PlayStation 2, and their pedigree was unmistakable since then, as can be seen in the beautiful art style in this game. As for the gameplay, this is a rather unique combination. It's a 2D real-time strategy game. It plays similar to Age of Empires of all things, which is really not what you would expect at first glance. Instead of the villager, you use the elves to gather crystals, which is the resource you will need to build better structures or runes that will in turn provide you with better units to attack your enemies and win the match. All this takes place within a magical setting, much similar to Harry Potter actually, where the main protagonist Lilith Bland is a student in a magic school trying to become a witch. The plot is very interesting too, the characters are all beautifully weird. This is a great game that will become only available through its physical format for the PlayStation 2 that goes for around $35, while the digital will cost you $9.99 for PlayStation 3 only. In my previous video, I said that the third birthday, which is the third entry in the Parasite Eve series, was unavailable now since the web stores are closed. That is only partially true, and I want to correct it now. Only through the Vita stores are we incapable of purchasing this game. Previously, the web store was a way to circumvent this problem, but now it's non-functional. But the PlayStation 3 and PSP systems remain as options to purchase and download the third birthday game. Also, there is still another workaround to get this game on the Vita, but it's a bit tricky and will require you to have a PlayStation 3 and a Vita with the same PlayStation Network account. You can purchase the game on your PlayStation 3, move over to the Vita, open your PlayStation Store inside the Vita, go to the options, which is the three little dots in the bottom right, choose download list, and if your account in the Vita is the same as the one that purchased the game on the PlayStation 3, you can now download the game to the Vita. I tested it myself, it works. I'm glad that there is a workaround to this at least, but this here is some broken star if I ever saw one. How many people will know how to do this? This happens only for a select few games that do not appear in the PlayStation Vita store by an error that never got fixed. Here's the list of games that have the same problem. You can pause the video to see each one. By the way, I want to thank viewers Arahikage Hayabusa and Sipaway for the info regarding how to download this game. So let's talk about it, shall we? As I said, it's the third entry in the Parasite Eve series, and was originally released for the PSP. This one is a bit of a departure to the rest of the series in the gameplay department, since it's more action shooter and less RPG oriented than the previous ones. I guess that this was the main reason that it got some average scores when it came out, but I disagree. I think it's a great title, even though I prefer the more methodical pacing from the first two games. There are so many new and interesting ideas involved in this gameplay, such as the ability to kind of possess other creatures, friend or foe, as well as all the customization you can do to Aya, which in the end made this game like a 9 out of 10 to me. Really, great experience to be had for sure here, and it holds up to this day. Also, some of the cutscenes are spectacular. The digital version of this game is $9.99 and can be played in the PlayStation 3, Vita or PSP, but again, to get it on the Vita, there's that workaround I talked about before. The physical copies on the other hand are for PSP only and are going for around $60. Next up, a true PS3 hidden gem from the very recently closed Sony Japan studio, The Last Guy. The Last Guy is a very unique game. First of all, the camera is super far away, kinda like in a SimCity game or Google Maps. There has been a zombie apocalypse caused by a beam of light that turned whoever was outside into zombies, but everyone lucky enough to be inside when it happened is still safe. You control the guy who wears a red cape and a trident, I think, weird, and you have to approach the buildings, which will cause the citizens to go outside. Then you gather up as many of them as you can, like a shepherd, and guide them to the safe zone. In each stage, you have a minimum number of citizens to save, and you can search for the optional VIPs scattered around for extra points. This is an awesome, truly fun game. I didn't want to stop playing while capturing. And guess what? This game only came out physically in Japan. And those copies, although not very expensive, going around for 20-25 bucks, will have to be imported. And the shipping could be much more expensive than that, depending on where you are. And since the digital copy goes for $9.99 for PlayStation 3 only, you might want to consider it since it's the least expensive option in any case. Following up with the Fatal Frame franchise. We currently have access to Fatal Frames 1, 2 and 3. This series has become more and more recognized as time goes on for its very interesting take on the horror genre in video games. They managed to create truly scary environments and atmosphere, and the camera mechanic is a unique and very interesting way to engage the player in these horror stories, which by the way are based on actual ghost tales from Japan's folklore. Pretty great games right here. Each one will cost you $9.99 for PlayStation 3 only, digitally, while the physicals range from $50 to $65 on the PlayStation 2, or around double those prices for the original Xbox, but the third entry is not available for this system. Next up, one of the best PSP RPGs that no one knows about, Hexyz Force. This is a traditional RPG with a battle mechanic that invites a welcome amount of strategy. In this game, the characters can equip special weapons called Ragnarok. These are powerful artifacts that can unleash attacks against single or multiple foes. The catch is that these attacks will cost you Ragna points that can only be replenished in special places or by leveling up, so deciding when and how to use the Ragna points introduces a nice layer of strategy, including using them when a level up is imminent, which even makes grinding feel less of a chore in this game. One thing that critics were negative about, but to me is a good thing, is that this is a comparatively short RPG, lasting a bit over 20 hours. But I like this amount of time for RPGs, and there is a strong incentive for replaying this game because there are 2 characters to start with, which change the narrative substantially. This is a sort of hidden RPG gem that has a lot to offer, including a nice cast of characters and story, and you can pick it up digitally for $14.99 on the Vita or PSP, while the physicals are commanding an absurd price right now. It's approaching $400, one of the highest in this list. Next up, a little treasure of a game that really deserved more recognition and will soon become unavailable unless you hack your PS Vita, Murasaki Baby. This is an enticingly weird little game that provides a very different take on the platforming genre. Pretty much everything you do in this game is through the different touch controls of the Vita. I recorded myself a little bit so you can get a better feel of how it works. I apologize for the poor camera quality, by the way. In this game you hold the baby's hand to guide it through the stage, and at specific points you will be required to use your other hand touching the screen in 2 different positions. So this is one of the rare Vita games that takes advantage of its multi-touch screen. It also uses the back touchpad to use the different powers that the baby unlocks through the game. This is for sure a worthwhile game, even though it's a short one, providing a uniquely fun style of gameplay that deserved more attention. So last chance for us to give it some love by getting it for $14.99 on the Vita. There are no physical copies, and with all the touch stuff, emulation is not gonna cut it, so after the stores close it will be only viable through hacking. Now, Drakengard 3. With the Nier franchise reaching mainstream visibility, a lot of people are discovering that there are 3 titles in the same universe in the Drakengard games. The first 2 are PlayStation 2 exclusives and unfortunately are not available digitally, but the third one is a PlayStation 3 exclusive and it is awesome. And it plays well too, in my opinion. I remember seeing some outlets giving this game some really low scores, but I couldn't disagree more. It's a hack and slash game with RPG elements, and much like the Nier games, it presents a very odd but fascinating world and characters that bounce between beautiful and ugly all the time. And I can understand that this is not something that everyone will appreciate, but if you do, there is a lot to enjoy in this game for sure. It's 100% exclusive to the PlayStation 3, going for $14.99 digitally, while the physicals are trending up, currently at over $60. And it's important to say that there are also a bunch of DLCs available for this game, especially in the 6 prologue scenarios that flesh out the story of the other intoners, which is pretty cool in my opinion. They each go for $5.99, kinda expensive if you wanna get them all, but they're certainly worth it if you're into the story because they provide a lot of background to all the main characters. Following up with Lunar Silver Star Harmony. This is a remade version of the first entry in the Lunar series of classic RPGs, and seriously, it's one of the best looking RPGs ever. Just look at it, so pretty. And the gameplay is also great. The combat feels very fluid despite being turn-based, and there is a nice variety of abilities to choose from. You take control of Alex, who grew up in the same village as the legendary Dragon Master Dyne, in his quest to become a Dragon Master himself. It's an incredibly fun adventure with superb storytelling, one of the best in the genre for sure. If you're a fan of traditional RPGs, this is a must-play. The digital copy goes for $14.99 on Vita or PSP, while physical copies for this PSP remake go for around $100. There are other versions of the first Lunar game, such as the original in Sega CD and the 2 other remade versions for PlayStation 1 and GBA, but they are all harder to find and much more expensive for complete copies. Another great title, although completely in Japanese, is Rapid Angel. This is a side-scroller brawler with really well done controls and some light platforming elements. You pick one of 3 heroines, Natsumi, Ayane, and Haruna, who work for a delivery company called Rapid Angel. They talk to their boss too in the cutscene, so this is obviously derived from the Charlie's Angels, but anime style. It's a surprisingly fun beat 'em up with a lot of charm and some pretty cool boss encounters. Each of the heroines have widely different gameplay styles, so there is a high incentive for multiple playthroughs even if you don't get the story whatsoever. You may want to consider taking a look into this. It's a great game, although 100% in Japanese. The digital copy is available on the PlayStation Store for $5.99, while the PlayStation 1 physical copies are Japan exclusive, and I couldn't even find a copy being sold in eBay, Amazon, or PlayAsia. So it's almost certain that it would be very expensive. Now for some frenetic twin-stick shooting goodness, Super Stardust Delta. This is a launch title for the Vita, which provides a very solid arcade gameplay to fans of this genre. You have access to 2 types of weapons that are very different both in use and in function. The main mode in this game divides itself into several planets you must protect from asteroids and invaders, and at the end of each planet stage there will be a cool boss fight to change things up. There are also plenty of other game modes providing a lot of variety. The Vita touch functionalities are used in this game, but not in an intrusive way or demanding at all. This is a very satisfying and addictive gameplay for sure, and it's not at all expensive for a Vita game. It goes for $9.99 and there are no physical copies of this one. There is also a DLC available for this game for extra $7.99 or $14.99 if you go straight for the bundle, and this unlocks 4 different game modes, one of which is very interesting. I tried capturing it here with the camera, sorry for the quality. In this, each of the 2 sticks will control one of the ship's cannons, while you use the gyroscope motion control of the Vita to maneuver the ship. Next up, God Hand. God Hand is a relatively high-budget 3D beat-em-up published by Capcom that mixes high adrenaline action with some over-the-top comedy, which is a mix that is much appreciated by some but can be a turn-off to others. The gameplay is surprisingly well done in my opinion, which is not an easy thing to pull off for this genre, especially in a game from the PlayStation 2 era. Your guy can perform a lot of cool combos, pick up stuff and throw at enemies, and use some awesome special moves. You probably already know if this type of game suits your style or not, so if it does, it can be found digitally for $9.99 on PlayStation 3 only, or physically on the PlayStation 2 only for around $200. So yeah, digital copies are the way to go if you don't mind not having it physically. This next title is a treasure. It's simply called Rain. In this one you control a little boy who has to stealth his way around monstrous creatures, but the catch is that both the creatures as well as the boy are invisible. However, whenever they are in the rain, they can be seen. This is a very curious mechanic and they keep adding new aspects to it. For instance, later on you run into mud puddles. If you step on them, the boy's shoes become visible even when sheltered from the rain, and it lasts until you step on a puddle of water. This unique gameplay in conjunction with the melancholic atmosphere and the classic music in the background create an experience like no other in video games. A treasure to be sure. Even more so of a treasure now that it's going away from the digital store, where you can still find it for $14.99. The physical copy is Japan exclusive and goes for around $25 plus the possible importation price. Next, a great lesser known tactical RPG, Ragnarok Tactics. This shares the same world as the MMORPG Ragnarok Online series of games, but this time it's not online, it's just a straight up tactical game that still brings back a lot of staples of the Ragnarok franchise, such as most of the same job classes, many of the same skills, and leveling up divided into normal levels that raise your stats and job levels that raise your skills. So those who have played the MMO games will feel right at home in this one. The gameplay is absolutely solid, one of the best strategy games on the PSP. It goes for $9.99 on Vita or PSP, while physical copies have gone up a lot recently, commanding around $200 for a complete North American copy. Now, for one of the best pure tactical games I've ever played, Frozen Synapse Prime. This is a game that simply excels at the strategy gameplay. You give commands to all your units before submitting your decisions, and different from a lot of strategy games out there is no telling what the outcome will be, since there is no way to predict if the enemy unit is going to move left or right or just stay still, and the tension that comes from anticipating what will happen is exhilarating in this game. This is an awesome game for strategy fans, a must play in my opinion. There are no physical copies of this game available, and the digital is $19.99 exclusive to the PlayStation 3 and Vita. There used to be a Steam version, but the developer took it down. It's no longer there. Next up, Contra Shattered Soldier, or let me say it right, Contra Shattered Soldier! Much like Hard Corps Uprising from my previous video, Contra Shattered Soldier also sticks to its classic Contra roots. It's still a side-scroller Contra with ultra high difficulty and providing a lot of those over-the-top change-ups to the gameplay that are both adrenaline pumping and amusing. Only thing that changed from the classic Contras is that you always have access to 3 weapons in this one. No power-ups to collect. This has a killer heavy metal soundtrack that fits the gameplay very well. This is a solid Contra game that is sure to keep fans busy for a while. The digital is $9.99, available on PlayStation 3 only, while physical copies are not too expensive at around $20, but since they are PlayStation 2 only and a lot of people won't have the means to play that, I decided to include this here. Now for the other PlayStation 2 Contra available, Neo Contra. This is more of a departure to the series, but not the first one to do it. It's an isometric shooter this time, with controls that feel a little weird the first time around, but once you get it, it's fine enough. You can lock your aim to a specific direction by pressing L2. It works just fine. This one also keeps the same 3 weapons layout from the Shattered Soldier too. Neo Contra is a solid isometric shooter that wasn't really what fans were looking for, but still presents a tough and mindlessly fun challenge for what it is. You can grab it for $9.99 digitally for PlayStation 3 only, or physically for around $30 for the PlayStation 2. Next up is a hard sell, but I'll try my best because this is a rather underappreciated and misunderstood game, Tokyo Jungle. Okay, Tokyo Jungle has a very unusual proposition, which at first glance may seem like a bad idea, but it really isn't. The story here is that all humans vanished from the face of the earth and all animals have taken over the city. It's basically a game of survival of the fittest, where you can take control of several different animals. It's amazing how many animals they animated for this game. In terms of genre, I guess this is a action survival game with a bit of RPG elements like leveling up and improving your stats. There's a bit of stealth involved in this too. What is cool about this game is that a bunch of aspects from wildlife are represented in this game, such as fighting for territory, threat of starvation, becoming the alpha in your species, and breeding. It's rather fascinating how they managed to turn these things into fun video game mechanics. There is nothing quite like this game out there. The digital version is for the PlayStation 3 only and will cost you $14.99. There is also a DLC pack that grants access to a bunch of new creatures for $6.99. There is a physical version of this game. It comes bundled with 3 other games in the Best of PlayStation Network Volume 1 collection. But this disc is outrageously expensive for a North American copy. It's going for close to $300 right now. So yeah, better grab the digital version. I know this is a weird game in a lot of different ways. I can completely understand that a lot of people hate to see cute pets killing each other. But as a game, it's a truly fun, interesting and deep experience that is really worthwhile in my opinion. Another fun title available on the same collection I just mentioned in the previous entry is When Vikings Attack. This is both absurdly simple and incredibly fun. In this, you control a non-specific regular citizen when suddenly a horde of Vikings invade. You gather up with other citizens, and the larger your group, the better, cause then you can pick up bigger things lying around and throw them into the damn Vikings. And that's it. This is the game. Like I said, pretty simple, but lots of fun. It controls perfectly too. This is a great game to play multiplayer, in co-op or competitive. It goes for $9.99 digitally for PlayStation 3 only, while physically it's only found in the Best of PlayStation Network Volume 1 I was talking about, which again goes for around $300, which is insane. By the way, I was checking and there is no Best of PlayStation Network Volume 2. I wonder what happened. Now, Persona 3 Portable. I had included Persona 3 FES in my previous video, but had omitted the PSP version of this game because FES has an epilogue not available in Portable, as well as improved cutscenes in comparison. However, I came to learn that both versions of this game have aspects unavailable to each other. Shout out to viewer Navi Games for this information, by the way. Persona 3 Portable grants exclusive access to the female protagonist, which is not only a different looking character, but also alters the conversation options within the game, which in turn grants access to different outcomes in a number of interactions and different romance options. So if you are a fan of this series and want to have all available experiences, Persona 3 Portable is the one to consider, and you better grab it now for $19.99 on the Vita or PSP, which is kind of expensive, but much less so than the insane asking price for the physical PSP version, which is going for over $200 easily. Following up with the Jumping Flash series. These are rather forgotten PlayStation 1 titles. They are rather fun first-person 3D platformers with a little bit of shooting that put the player in the shoes of a pilot of a bunny robot. You can double or triple jump, and the gameplay revolves mostly around this mechanic. It may sound simple, but the moment-to-moment gameplay feels great. These are somewhat hidden gems from the PlayStation 1 era that remain fun to play after all this time. They are available digitally on all three platforms for $5.99. The physical copies go for over $150 for the first one and around $40 for Jumping Flash 2. However, Jumping Flash 1 can also be found in the PlayStation 1 Classic Mini Console, which has gone up in price a lot recently. I remember it being discounted for around $20 or something around that, but now it's going for a bit over $60 on eBay. But of course, it comes with other 19 games as well, so it may be a good option for some. Next up, a hidden gem that is surprisingly deep and enjoyable, Pucelle Tactics. This is a PlayStation 2 turn-based tactical game, as you may already have guessed, which provides a lot of different mechanics to differentiate itself. This is where this game shines. Much like in Fire Emblem, you move your characters and order them to attack, but in this one, you gotta be mindful of your unit's positioning even more so than in other strategy games, since enemies can surround you and attack all at once, increasing their damage output, and your units can do the same. This changes up the dynamic of the battles a lot, and it's not the only thing that does it in this game. There is a whole other mechanic of purifying these crystals that causes a chain reaction that may damage enemies or heal your allies. And you can even purify enemies to convert them into your army. And to teach you all this, the game provides a nice tutorial. Also needs to be said that there is a lot of humor in this story and character, especially the main protagonist, who is a scrappy and very insubordinate demon hunter apprentice. This is one of the best strategy games on the PlayStation 2 for sure, and goes for around $50 for the physical copy, while digitally it's less expensive at $9.99 for the PlayStation 3 only. Next, Soul Sacrifice Delta. In terms of gameplay, this is similar to a Monster Hunter game and is the remastered version of the original Soul Sacrifice. This game is a hard sell in terms of presentation in my opinion. I think that most people are not going to be fans of the grotesque look that this game carries. However, the gameplay has a lot to offer, although presenting a steep learning curve which makes you feel lost in the beginning. But if you stick with it, the combats will become very rewarding. This is a deep game that can feel unwelcoming and will require some investment on your part, such as is with the similar Monster Hunter games, but will give a lot in return as well. This one will cost you $17.99 for the digital version, exclusive to the PlayStation Vita, while physical copies came out only on the Asian market and will cost you close to $60 and are trending up. Following up with an entry in a famous franchise that will pretty much become available only through illegitimate ways after the stores close, The House of the Dead 4. I don't need to say much about this, it's a rather fun franchise of arcade on-rail shooting games, and this fourth entry in the series is no exception. This is a time-tested gameplay style that never fails to be fun. The character models and animations are very awkward, but who cares really? This game can be played with the normal 6-axis controller or the PlayStation Move, and works pretty well with both styles, but I think it's even better with the Move, and even more so in co-op. This is a digital-only game that goes for $9.99 exclusively to the PlayStation 3. Of course there is also the arcade version, but good luck tracking one of those down. So yeah, if we don't get this before the stores close, we will only have the options of emulation or hacking, and the emulation doesn't even have support for the Move yet, so even worse. Now, Valkyria Chronicles II. Although not exactly what the fans were hoping for as a sequel for the original, Valkyria Chronicles 2 is a totally worthwhile successor. I don't need to say much about this, as it has become a popular strategy franchise, and this one follows the same gameplay of the original very closely. The only problem people had is that this game came out for the PSP and fans were hoping for a PlayStation 3 follow-up. But this one is just as good in terms of providing a very deep and satisfying tactical experience, which is not really found in this exact way anywhere else. The digital copy goes for $14.99 for the Vita or PSP, while the physical will be more expensive at around $80, or half that price for a PAL version since the PSP is region free in case the shipping price is favorable to you. In the previous episode, one of the entries was Castlevania Chronicles. But there is another lesser known Castlevania game available on PSN that will soon be physical only. Castlevania Lament of Innocence. This is a prequel Castlevania that, although in 3D, still stays true to its origins, with the whip as the main weapon, a bunch of returning secondary weapons such as the cross and axe, hearts as ammo, which remains one of the weirdest things in video games, and a somber castle to get lost in and Metroidvania your way through. It has its fair share of shortcomings, such as samey looking rooms repeated over and over, and some awkward platforming segments. But this game also gives back as much as you invest in it. You keep unlocking new abilities, and towards the end, you will have grown to be a much better vampire hunter, which feels awesome. This game is available only for the PlayStation 3 for $9.99 digitally, while its physical copy for PlayStation 2 goes for around $40 and it's trending up. Next up, the only entry in this long-running series to ever leave Japan, Kenka Bancho Badass Rumble. This is the third game in this beat-em-up series, but it doesn't follow the story of any other Kenka Bancho game, so it's safe to jump in even if you're not familiar with the series. This is a rather different type of brawler, and I guess it's not for everyone, because the fights are slow and stiff, purposefully so, which in the beginning may be a turn off to some. However, if you stick with it, you'll keep unlocking new moves that really improve the combat, and in the end, you'll be feeling very good about the experience. In this game, you control Takashi here, who has the coolest walk ever and wants to become the top bancho in Japan. Also, one of the best aspects in this game is the humor. For instance, before each Bancho fight, you and your opponent will stare at each other and exchange insults, which is very amusing. This is a surprisingly deep game too for a brawler, so there is a lot of enjoyment to be had. It goes for $14.99 for Vita or PSP, while the physical PSP version will cost you around 150 bucks. Next up, one of the best horror games that is overlooked by most, Siren Blood Curse. This is a remade version of the original Siren game that didn't meet the expectations of the developers in terms of quality, so they kept working on it until they got to the way they really wanted, and the result is a very unique and suspenseful horror game that will test your guts. Blood Curse was released episodically, and the first 2 episodes are not the best, so I would advise sticking with it because it keeps getting better. Each episode will tell you a different side of the story with different characters. The gameplay is a big highlight in this game, where at tense moments the screen splits in half and you can see both your character as well as the foe's point of view. This is pretty cool and increases the tension substantially. This is one of the best horror games for sure, and it's going to become harder to get because the physical versions are PAL only, so there is the importation to consider, this being the main reason why this is on the list. Other than that, the game goes for 25 bucks physically, so it's just a bit over the $19.99 of the digital asking price. Now for a classic title in a well-known strategy series, Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together. This is a PSP remake of the SNES original that was also ported to the PlayStation 1. This entry plays very similar to the Final Fantasy Tactics games, instead of following the gameplay style of the Ogre battle games like March of the Black Queen or the N64 one, which puts the player in control of squads and battalions instead of units directly like this one. I don't need to explain too much about this, it's a classic type of gameplay with an epic story and some of the best character portraits ever. You can pick this up for $9.99 on Vita or PSP, while the PSP physical copy will cost you around 30 bucks, and PlayStation 1 copies are crazy expensive at around 150 bucks, and it's not the remake version. Now for a extremely underappreciated title, Tokobot. This is a fun 3D adventure game that presents action, puzzles, and exploration, all tied to the Tokobot joint actions, where you command your little robots to mimic your guy's moves, and he can use them to perform a multitude of actions. The controls are surprisingly responsive and simple, which I feel could have been a drawback to a game of this nature. There are 2 versions of this game available, the original PSP version available on PSP or Vita, and the enhanced version only for the PlayStation 3. Both versions are $9.99. There are pros and cons for each version, so it's hard to suggest which one to get, but the original version is the highest scoring on reviews. You can find the physicals for relatively cheap, only a bit more expensive than the digital versions, but some of you may prefer getting it digitally. It goes for around 20 bucks for the PlayStation 2 version and around 15 for the PSP one. Now, Motorstorm RC. Remember the RC racing games from the NES and SNES? I used to love those, and it's so cool to see a great title in this genre in more modern systems. Motorstorm is a super fun one of these, with the typical controls that granted are a bit hard to grasp at first, but provide very realistic feeling of driving a remote controlled car. The races are short and sweet, either against a bunch of other little cars or against the clock, which is represented by the arrows. Awesome racing fun right here that is going for super cheap, $4.99 on PlayStation 3 or Vita, or $9.99 for the complete edition with all the DLCs, which provides a ton of new cars and new courses too. There is a physical case of this game, but it's European only, and it doesn't include a game card. It's the voucher only for download, and it goes for crazy 140 bucks. So yeah, I would really suggest going straight for the digital. In the previous video I covered the 2 original Wild Arms games, but there is another one in the series available on PlayStation Store, Wild Arms XF. This is not a typical RPG, however, it's a tactical one this time. What I really like about this is how fitting it feels to mix strategy gameplay with the Wild Arms universe, with the shootouts and the really long ranged weapons. There is a drawback to this game, however. The difficulty is really high, so at points it may be a good idea to have a guide handy, because they went too far with the battle requirements, I feel. But if you are a patient RPG strategy fan, Wild Arms XF has a lot to offer, with great visuals, music and story. It can be found digitally on PlayStation Vita or PSP for $9.99, while physical copies are close to $100 complete. Now for a very quirky curiosity that will soon become completely unavailable through legitimate ways. Floating Cloud God saves the Pilgrims. Yeah. This is a delightful little side-scroller shoot-em-up that strips down the gameplay to its basics and focuses on being challenging and fun and nothing else. In this one, you are a god, so you're invincible, but your pilgrims are helpless, so you gotta always keep an eye out for them as well as the enemies. The game starts super simple, seems like it's gonna be a very average or below average shoot 'em up, but they keep throwing new types of enemies that really shake things up. It's clever game design really. It becomes challenging in a good way soon enough, which I really appreciated. I don't really have any illusions that I'll be convincing too many people to consider this, but I really think that this deserved more recognition and certainly more respect now that it's going to be fading away into almost complete obscurity after the stars close down. This is the cheapest of all games on the list, and it comes in two versions. The original goes for $2.99 and is available on the PlayStation 3 and PSP only, while the HD version goes for $3.49 and is a PlayStation Vita exclusive. There are no physical copies. I would advise getting the Vita version if you can, not only because it's an HD, but also they improved the controls to a twin-stick shooter type, which feels much better than the regular version. Next up, a PlayStation 3 exclusive that is a spectacle, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle. This is a fighting game that focuses more on making the experience a joy to play and watch than in being a balanced fighting game. And although it may lack some of the balancing mechanics found in other more seriously competitive fighting games, it in my opinion more than makes up for it by being incredibly stylish, true to its anime roots, and simply just fun. I would say that this is a great fighting game to play on your own too. This game has no North American physical copies, so you'll have to find a Japanese or Asian market version if you want the physical. The Asian market version has a cover in English, but both can be played in English. You can find the Japanese copy for kind of cheap, around $20–25, but there is the shipping factor to consider, so unless you find a copy already in your region, you may want to favor going for the digital version for the kinda hefty price of $29.99. Next up, Jeanne D'Arc. This is a Sony-published turn-based tactical RPG that deserved to become a series in my opinion. This game is very loosely based on the historical story of Joan of Arc, and I mean really loosely, cause it mixes in magic and holy artifacts that can transform your characters and foes into holy warriors, which is weird at first, I admit, but also kinda cool. All these aspects come together to form a surprisingly deep tactical gameplay unlike nothing else. This game has great pacing too, never feeling like a daunting task to learn all the mechanics. Very solid strategy game here. The story is interesting too, filled with great looking anime cutscenes. This one is available digitally on the PlayStation Vita and PSP for $14.99, while physical copies are trending up currently at around $35. Next, Dead Head Fred. This is an action game with a bit of platforming and exploration, where you take control of Fred, who is dead and headless. Yeah, he was a private investigator who died on the job and was reanimated to complete his mission, but the doc couldn't fix his head, so he just left his brains. It's a pretty cool premise and fits perfectly to this weird and twisted world they created for this game. Fred can swap multiple different heads, unlocked during the game, that completely changes the animations as well as his combat moves. This is an amazingly well done game with great graphics for the PSP, outstanding voiceover, great humor and balanced combat. Awesome game that I think not a lot of people even know about. It goes for $9.99 for Vita or PSP, while physical PSP copies will cost you around $50. Another very obscure PlayStation 3 game that only came out in the West in digital form is Mamorukun Curse. This is a fun isometric shoot 'em up which reminds me of the Pocky and Rocky games which I loved in the SNES, not only because it's cartoonish and colorful, but also because the screen doesn't scroll automatically, so you have freedom of movement and can even choose which way to go in branching sections. The shooting is solid and a bit more on the bullet hell side, but not completely. This is not a 10 out of 10 game by any means. It's more like a 7, 7.5, but still, it provides a lot of fun. And it's one of the cheapest in this list, going for $4.99 digitally on the PlayStation 3 only, while the physicals are Japan exclusive and can go for over $300 for the PlayStation 3 version or around $130 for the Xbox 360 version. Next, Hyper Crazy Climber. This is a Japan exclusive PlayStation 1 game that made it to the West all these years later somehow. The premise is simple: choose one of 3 characters who have different traits and climb several different types of challenging towers. In your way, of course, there will be all sorts of obstacles and creatures, but you will have access to items to help you out, and the help is welcome because this is a demanding and difficult game to learn the controls. But like anything, once you do, there is a lot of fun to be had. This goes for $5.99 on PlayStation 3, Vita or PSP, while physical copies are not that expensive, around $20, but are Japan exclusive, so there is the importation to consider and the fact that those won't play on non-Japanese systems. Next, and probably the weirdest game on this list, Monster Bag. This is here more as a fun curiosity than anything else. Monster Bag is a sort of a puzzle game where you control the titular monster bag and have to get back to your owner who forgot to bring you with her. The gameplay is hard to describe. You have to get from point A to point B by jumping from person to person, but in your way there will be lots of types of obstacles, like a thirsty kid who wants lemonade, so you do whatever to get the lemonade and throw it at the kid's face with the Vita's touch controls. It's a pretty wacky and funny game, and it goes to unexpected places, believe me, it keeps getting crazier. This is not a great game in terms of gameplay, but I found the ideas within very creative and the art style and color palette are very interesting too. The sad thing is that this unique game will become almost impossible to get after the stores close. You either buy it now digitally for $9.99 or your only other option will be hacking the Vita, since there is no physical copy and the emulator is not compatible with this game. Next up, Castle Tsukigime 2. This is a solid top-down bullet hell shooter that has become notorious much more because of the hilariously atrocious script and voiceover than because of its gameplay. Don't get me wrong, this is a fun and challenging shooter, nothing wrong about it, but nothing too great about it either. Still a fun time for fans of the genre. But the characters' lines in this game are so funny that this suddenly becomes much more enjoyable of a game. Believe me, it's one hilarious line after another, and this is the main reason I'm including this one here. Castle Tsukigime 2 was exclusive to the PlayStation 2 in the West, which goes for around $40. Then it got ported in digital form to the PlayStation 3 exclusively, which goes for $9.99. Next, a very psychedelic puzzle game, Surge Deluxe. This one is incredibly fun. You can sink hours into this without even noticing it. It's very simple, but gets very challenging later on. Basically, you just use the Vita touch controls to match 3. This is match 3 evolved. I think they even say this as a selling point for the game. The touch controls actually work really well, and that's it. Just simple, fun, addictive gameplay. And the music is spectacular in this one too, going really well with this sort of game. It's one of the cheapest Vita exclusive games too, going for $4.99 digitally and without any physical copies. So this is another case that will become only available through hacking after the stores close, which is a shame. Another game that is going to become hard to get through legitimate ways is Neo Geo Heroes Ultimate Shooting. Pretty obscure title too, but one that features a lot of well-known characters from SNK. This is a solid bullet hell shoot 'em up, where each of the available characters have widely different shooting styles, so there's a lot of replay value in this one. It's not one of the best shooters ever, but is fun and could be attractive for fans of SNK franchises. Also, if you want to play this game legit, the only option other than the hefty price of $19.99 for the digital copy on Vita or PSP would be the crazy expensive Japan exclusive PSP version, going for around $100 plus the possibly very expensive shipping price unless you find it already in your region. Next up, a beloved competitive puzzle game that got an HD remake for the PlayStation 3 generation, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 HD Remix. This is a highly addictive game that is super easy to pick up and play, and that is very nostalgic for a lot of people. The HD remake not only improves the graphics, but also includes 3 gameplay modes that were not available in the PlayStation 1 original. Other than the PlayStation 3 digital version, this is also available on the Xbox 360 digitally. But for those that don't have any of the Xbox consoles, this remains as the only option and it is going away soon, so you may want to consider getting it. The digital copy goes for $9.99 on PlayStation 3 only. There is one way to have this remake physically, through the Capcom Digital Collection, where it comes bundled with 7 other Capcom games. But this collection was only released for the Xbox 360. It goes for over $50. That is also the price of the PlayStation 1 physical copy. There are also GBA and Saturn versions that go for higher prices, especially the Saturn one that surpasses $250. There are a few entries in the Tales of series that never left Japan. And before the Vita existed, one of them was Tales of Hearts, which is originally a Nintendo DS Japan exclusive. The game was later remade for the Vita as Tales of Hearts R. This version was localized, although the voiceover stayed untouched in Japanese only, and has widely improved graphics and a completely overhauled battle system, which is awesome and the best part of this game for sure. I was not a fan of the story, however, and other than Kohaku, which is the female lead, the other characters felt a little bit too stereotypical in my opinion, but the battles more than compensated for those shortcomings, and it's mostly a matter of opinion. Others may enjoy the characters and the story more than I did. This game is 100% exclusive to the Vita, where it goes for the hefty price of $29.99 digitally, which is not as expensive as the physicals that will set you back around $200. This is by no means the best Tales of game. Vesperia and Symphonia are superior, in my opinion. Those are the other ones I've played so far, but for fans of the series, it's still a great entry that will be soon left in physical form only. And that's it. That's all I got for you this time. I hope this was helpful, interesting, or entertaining to you. And believe it or not, I still have more titles to show you guys. Especially a list of Japan-only digital titles to get before the stores close. That would be a really interesting list, I can guarantee that. So let me know if you would be interested in a list of games to get from the Japanese PlayStation Store before it closes, and I can make a video about that. And if you haven't yet, check out the first video for other 50 games to consider getting for these systems before the stores close. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing and all that, and I'll see you soon.